Republicans control Congress, but for some reason they can't agree on what governing for Trump actually means. The House is chasing Trump's every immediate whim and demand. The Senate is trying to preserve power that outlasts Trump and the impending midterms. But it's the country that's stuck paying for the split. There's a difference between having power and knowing how to use it. And right now, Republicans have Congress, they have the White House, they have the votes to move their agenda, but look closely. They're not just fighting Democrats. They're fighting each other too. The House wants to move fast, perform loyalty, and answer whatever Trump wants today. The Senate wants the same power, but with a longer game, cleaner process, and fewer fingerprints on them. Same party, different playbook. And the split is now showing up in shutdown fights, surveillance votes, immigration funding, and a now taxpayer-backed ballroom idea at the White House. We're not just asking what Congress passed. We're asking why the people in charge cannot agree on how to govern. Check this out.
As of the current moment, there is a vote that has been open on the floor of the House of Representatives since basically just before 5:30, which means that for hours and hours and hours, the Republicans who control the floor, they control the House, they control the Senate, they control the White House, have been unable to pass their own bill. We're hearing that the Senate won't pass the House FISA bill. And here we are, meanwhile, late night, once again, middle of a week, and these guys don't have a plan.
Welcome to the Quiet Loud. I'm DeAntony Collins. So, let's start with the basic problem. Republicans are not split over whether they want power. They're split over how openly they want to use it. Axios reported this week that House Speaker Mike Johnson and Senate Majority Leader John Thune are publicly at odds over funding for the Department of Homeland Security. DHS, you might have heard it referred to that way, with Thune frustrated that Johnson has not moved on a Senate-passed DHS appropriations bill that already cleared the Senate twice. That matters because DHS has been stuck in a shutdown for more than 70 days now. Not because Democrats control Congress, because they don't, but because House Republicans and Senate Republicans cannot line up on the same plan. The Senate approach has been more procedural. Fund most of DHS and then use the reconciliation to push ICE and Border Patrol funding with a simple majority. Now, CBS News reported that Senate Republicans advanced a budget resolution to begin that reconciliation path, with Lindsey Graham saying that they were moving forward on immigration funding through budget rules. Now, Washington Post reported the same basic strategy: to fund ICE and Border Patrol for years without Democratic help, while relying on a broader deal to reopen the rest of DHS. Now, I've talked about this in the last few episodes, much more so in my first guested episode with Antoine Marshall. You go back to that, check that out. We got a long piece on that really just digs into that. But I'm going to move on from that part here. So we know that that's the Senate GOP's long game: to use procedure, to avoid the filibuster, to lock in enforcement money. But over in the House, Mike Johnson is still trying to manage a conference that keeps pulling him toward Trump's immediate demands and the hardest right members' pressure points. So Axios reports that Johnson's Hell Week ran into GOP infighting, with House Republicans failing to advance a rule out of committee. And when the rule fails, almost nothing major can move on the floor. That's not normal strength. And that's not how we try to govern, okay? That's a majority unable to coalesce around itself. And this has been building since early in Trump's second term. Back in February, Axios reported that House Republicans had to hold a vote open for 45 minutes just to flip holdouts on a shutdown package, with Trump personally pressuring dissenters and even attacking Thomas Massie's wife on Truth Social. That's the pattern, guys. The House is not governing from confidence. It's governing from a place of crisis management. Trump creates the crisis and they try to manage it. And every time they get close to a vote, somebody has to be threatened, flattered, flipped, or Johnson just closes up Congress and sends everybody home. And this matters because when the majority cannot govern itself, the country gets shutdowns and delays and hostage politics instead of a functioning government that is out here working for the public good. And if the House is a chaos engine, the Senate is trying to be something else. Not moderate now, not noble, You're not going to catch me saying that about this Senate Republican class. But they are being more strategic. This is the part that needs to be said a little bit more clearly. Now, hear me, because the Senate Republicans are not suddenly pro-democracy heroes. No, no, no. They want Trump's agenda. They want that ICE funding. They want the border money. They want conservative judges, agency control, and tax policy that they want. Okay? But they also understand something that the House keeps seeming to forget, that power has to survive to the next vote. And that is, they have to survive past the next vote. And that is why the Senate keeps reaching for process, conciliation, budget instructions, separate funding vehicles, procedural escape hatches for themselves. Okay. The Senate passed a budget resolution 50-48 to move toward ICE and Border Patrol funding through reconciliation, with Rand Paul and Lisa Murkowski against the, joining Democrats against it, according to Forbes reporting. Now that tells you two things, in my opinion. At first, the Senate Republicans are absolutely trying to fund Trump's enforcement agenda. And second, even inside the Senate GOP, this is not perfectly unified. You can see the same Senate versus House split in FISA. Okay, Axios reported that Trump hosted FISA skeptical House Republicans at the White House because Mike Johnson needed the White House to help flip holdouts on reauthorizing Section 702. Then Axios went and reported that Trump suffered a rare defeat with House Republicans when he failed to rally them behind a key FISA vote. Now, this also matters because FISA is not some symbolic culture war resolution. This right here, this is surveillance authority. This is national security. This is, right up in the GOP's wheelhouse, right what they want inside of their governing power. But even there, Trump could not simply just snap his fingers and make the House Republicans fall in line with him. This is kind of the fracture we're starting to see. And I've talked about that in several episodes. In fact, my last episode was mostly dedicated to the fracture happening inside of the elected MAGA base. Okay. The House performs loyalty tests, but they cannot always deliver the votes because their majority is already so slim. The Senate wants the same ideological outcome, but wants to package it in a way that's going to survive them should they lose this midterms, which they likely will, and the president then goes on to be a lame duck, and then they go in weak into the 2028 cycle. All right, so when people ask if the Republicans are divided, my short answer is yeah, but not in the way that, cable and legacy media panels usually say it, because they're not divided between pro-Trump and anti-Trump. They're divided between immediate obedience and long-term Republican control. All right. And this matters because a party can be unified around power and still collapse over their backwards tactics. And while they're fighting over procedure, look at what they still find time to prioritize, because it's not healthcare. It's not education. It's not childcare. Okay. We're talking about Trump's ballroom. Okay, this is where the absurdity starts to explain the whole system, because Reuters reported that congressional Republicans are pushing legislation to fund and speed construction of Trump's proposed private funded White House ballroom, okay? A project that is estimated around $400 million. Now let that sit for a second. $400 million. Okay, DHS is in a historic 70-day plus shutdown fight. House and Senate Republicans are arguing over how to fund immigration enforcement. Surveillance authority is colliding and right in there with the GOP infighting with the FISA bill. But somehow there is legislative energy for this ballroom. Okay, now Reuters reported that Lindsey Graham and other Republicans crafted a bill to finance the project largely at taxpayer expense after Trump had previously said private money would pay for it. Okay. Now we're talking about this, that private industry and some foreign actors and some of whoever else was supposedly donating money to this ballroom that is going to sit on the grounds of the White House. Okay. Now this harkens back to Mexico's going to pay for it, right? He ran on Mexico paying for the wall in 2015-16. He got in office. Did Mexico pay for the wall? No. They turned around and said, hey, well, we should pay for it because it's a matter of national security. We should pay for it. We should pay for it, after all of the saying I'm not gonna, we're not even gonna have to pay for it. It's gonna be free for us. Now he's been saying the same thing that for some reason 150 years of people have been asking for this ballroom. Now I've not been alive for 150 years. I've only been here for about 40 of them. But even in that time, I hadn't heard anybody clamoring for a ballroom on the White House grounds. And I never read in any of the history books about anybody talking about wanting a ballroom at the White House over the last 150 years. Okay. And it was something that we weren't even going to have to pay for. So you're telling me, did he actually even have funding for this coming in, or was it just people committing to some funds? I've brought in 17, 18 trillion dollars and we haven't seen dime one from all of these countries out here. All right. I guess we'll just have to see. But anyway, Graham's office tied the push to building this ballroom to security concerns after alleged shooting there was a shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, but we don't know who did the shooting. Secret Service agent took a slug to the vest, but they're not even being open about who fired it, because we know law enforcement may fire some shots as well, and they're not saying who did it. So go ahead and let that sit with you for a minute. But anyway, like I said, Graham's office tied the push of go ahead and building this ballroom to security concerns over this incident that happened at the White House Correspondents' Dinner that Trump attended along with all of the cabinet, no designated survivor, by the way. And Graham said that the facility would include, quote, a lot of military stuff, including a Secret Service annex, okay? And this is exactly the kind of things House Republicans love. A Trump-branded project, because they have been rubber stamping stuff with his name, face, and likeness all over it. They love a loyalty test. They love a good visual, something they can sell as security while also giving Trump a monument. But it also exposes a larger problem of theirs. They can move fast when it's about Trump's image. They can move fast when it's about enforcement. They can move real fast when it's about creating a spectacle or dodging a spectacle, but when it's time to govern, fund agencies, pay workers, resolve actual public needs for the public good, suddenly the same party can't agree with itself at all, can't figure anything out. And that matters because priorities tell the truth faster than speeches do. We watch what they do, not what they say, right? So the question is not whether they're busy. They're busy. We know they're busy. The question is, busy doing what? So this is the frame for the whole episode. House Republicans keep acting like the job is to prove loyalty to Trump, while Senate Republicans keep acting like the job is to turn Trump's demands into durable, lasting power. Those are two different things. And when those two instincts collide, government stalls because they're not working toward the public good. Axios reported that Johnson's, quote, Hell Week was supposed to move DHS funding, FISA, and other majority priorities like the Farm Bill before recess hit. But internal GOP disputes are derailing that agenda. The New York Post reports that House Republicans were readying yet another DHS funding bill 73 days into the shutdown, even as the Senate has already passed its own approach. And the House was scheduled to leave for recess until May 12th. Another recess. These guys have been on vacation since they got started. So they're going on another recess, or should be on recess until May 12th after dealing with other priorities. Now, that's the part that regular people like us understand immediately. They can argue for weeks. They can miss all sorts of deadlines. They can send their members home. But the workers, they still need paychecks. Airports still need staffing. Disasters happening all over the country needs response. They need funding. They need capacity. They need people paying attention to what's going on in those areas and the different disasters that they have. Families still need government to function. And instead of functioning, Congress keeps turning into a Trump management center, doing everything he needs and wants and shielding him from everything that's coming against him. So can Johnson keep his right flank calm in the meantime? Can John Thune get the votes without blowing up the Senate process? Can Trump pressure enough people to get his own way? We'll see. Because we don't know if the House can even pass a rule or if the Senate can pick it up and go with it. Because what we're seeing is not governing. We're seeing a party trying to manage a coalition built on contradiction and hypocrisy. They want institutional power, but they keep feeding anti-institutional politics. They love government and hate it. They want order, but they reward chaos. They want to own Washington, but they run against Washington even while they control it. And this matters because if the people in charge cannot decide whether they are a governing party or a loyalty operation with all sorts of litmus tests and fealty to the president, the country becomes collateral damage. And we're seeing that now. We're trapped under it. Political collapse usually does not start with the opposition. It starts inside the party that thinks it has control. Late in the Nixon era, the public saw the breaking point as one dramatic resignation, right? But before that came the quiet part. Republicans in Congress slowly started realizing that defending Nixon was becoming more dangerous than breaking it off with him. Now, this is not a perfect comparison. History never repeats that cleanly. It often rhymes, but the pattern is useful. When a leader becomes bigger than the party itself, the party eventually has to decide whether it exists to govern or it exists to insulate and protect him. And right now, Republicans are trying to do both. The House is chasing Trump's every demand, and the Senate is trying to preserve that very machinery of their power. And the result is dysfunction with a majority there much to it. Same party, different playbook. With our country stuck in the consequences. All right, y'all. Please make sure y'all like, subscribe, comment, and share. Please join our small but mighty growing quiet quorum. And as always, stay grounded, stay informed, and stay loud quietly. This is The Quiet Loud. Y'all take care.